In what was described as one of the most brutal and heinous ends in recent memory, Jason Bryden was sought out in his own home and then struck with his own samurai, a blade, and nunchucks. The incisions and welts and lumps and bruises and dents left the 38-year-old Kilmarnock man beyond recognition. Scotland, and Kilmarnock especially, had a reputation for drug-related crimes. There was no short of crime bosses, dealers, gangsters, enforcers, and hitmen and runners. Sadly, it comes with the territory. On the 5th of July 2015, 36-year-old James Clark and his brother, 38-year-old John Clark, had spent the evening drinking and taking Class A in what was described as bingeing. Discussions soon turned to making money and getting more Class A. The brothers then formatted a plan. They decided to storm Jason Bryden's home. At least the idea was nothing more than gibberish at the time, when the two men were sat on the sofa out of their faces. But then the brothers had reached a promise to go through with the theft. This was going to be a robbery. They fetched two scarves, fastened it around their faces, and then took out a kitchen blade and a pair of nunchucks. The drink and white had inebriated the brothers' fear or any thoughts of consequential thinking. For example, what happens when you try to storm a known dealer's home and take his product, his money, and other items, and also the ramifications of what will happen if you are confronted by that dealer too. James Clark and John Clark did not care. After all, the brothers were gangsters in their own rights. So, 38-year-old Jason Bryden was a known dealer in the Kilmarnock area, but he was also a son, a father, and a friend. James and John were also considered to be on good terms with Jason Bryden, as the two men had previously given Jason a gold bracelet in exchange for Class A. So they did have a former communication, whether that be business relationships or a dealer and customer relationship. And again, John and James had previously given Jason a gold bracelet in exchange for Class A. So during the late night of July 5th of 2015, John Clark and James Clark had travelled to Jason's Herschel Gardens home. James Clark was said to have forced his way inside Jason's home as he sat on the sofa watching TV. John Clark followed inside. The action of booting their way through the front door and walking into 38-year-old's home was so rapid that Jason had no time to respond or even to investigate. James and John cornered Jason, and then they demanded the gold bracelet back. They also demanded cash and all of the Class A. Now, despite the scarves covering James and John's faces, it was alleged that Jason Bryden had recognised the two brothers' voices. After that, this is when the robbery went bad. What happened next was said to have been something that resembled a horror movie. Jason Bryden had been bladed upwards of 6 times. The side of his face had also been rocked with a blunt object that left dents and welts, and 3 of his arteries had been snipped. Red covered a lot of the walls and also the flooring area. Neighbours told police that they had witnessed 2 men standing in front of Jason as he was on the sofa that was positioned by the big open window, defenceless, shouting in agony and pain as he winced and withered with each strike. Still, John and James did not relent. Police do believe that the samurai used in the incident did, however, actually belong to Jason. Now, witnesses raised the alarm and called Scotland Emergency Services. On the call to dispatchers, witnesses called Jason Bryden Jason Dunlop, which was also a name the 38-year-old Kilmarnock dealer had gone by. The call to dispatchers came through at 10 minutes past 11 in the evening. Police and ambulance crew rushed to the scene, and by the time police and ambulance services had arrived at the crime scene, Jason had already lost litres of red. He was barely conscious, and his face was all but drained of colour. Critical care teams had attempted to stop the flow of red and had also given him medicine to keep his heart beating. Jason was then put into the back of an ambulance where he was taken to Cross House Hospital for emergency care. Jason Bryden managed to cling on to life for 3 whole days, but soon he was tragically pronounced dead. And in the aftermath of the police let the community know that they had people of interest they needed to speak to, and they were actively looking for. Police also noted that they had conducted door-to-door inquiries, had obtained CCTV from front door cameras, shops, and buses, as well as dashcam, and asked for anyone who was in the area of Hareshaw Gardens around the time of the incident on Saturday, July 5th, or who had witnessed the brutal and callous incident or has any information to please come forward, however small it was. Now, because people in Kilmarnock did not want to be labelled a grass, there was initially a wall of silence. However, Jason's neighbours did do the right thing, and witness statements were taken. The names James Clark and John Clark were given to police, and when police investigated the two men, they noticed that James and John Clark, who were both from Kilmarnock as well, were very serious men. James had previously been arrested for attempted and also dealing offences. So when James was arrested and placed in handcuffs and then taken into police custody for questioning less than a week later, James Clark had broken down, looking at the evidence laid out on the table, for example still images of CCTV and DNA evidence that put him and his brother at the scene of the crime. James is said to have told police officers, "I didn't mean it, it was an accident." James had also explained to police that the brothers made a silly mistake and went to Jason's home in order to retrieve a bracelet. They says they took a blade and nunchuckers as a precaution because they feared Jason Bryden. However, when they made their way into Jason's home, James Clark says that Jason had lain wait for the two brothers and he was armed with a samurai. James had no choice but to defend himself for fear of losing his life. This was a robbery that had gone bad in the worst possible way. Now, when John was arrested, John explained that the only reason he had got involved was because his brother James was losing a battle with Jason. Again, both Clark brothers were already known to police. John Clark, who has 23 previous convictions, was convicted on the grounds of acting with his brother, and James Clark, who has 38 previous convictions, including one for attempted he was found guilty of the Now, in court, the judge had dismissed any cause of self-defence, explaining that police says that the scene in Hareshaw Gardens was smeared with red. Jason Bryden had not been killed in quick fashion. He was targeted in his own home. He was vulnerable at the time because he did not expect anyone to break into the house. He had been bladed 6 times, he was struck repeatedly, and it was sustained. In his final moments, he had shouted out in pain so loud that neighbours had come out of their homes to see what the commotion was about. And then they saw the Clark brothers standing over Jason as they were carrying him slowly as he lay slumped on the sofa. It was evident that Jason Bryden had been killed in a brutal fashion, the worst in recent times. Again, 3 arteries snipped, and he was killed over a gold bracelet that the brothers had given him for Class A, cash, and also because they wanted to take his stash. James Clark was jailed for life with a minimum term of 22 years. His brother, John Clark, was told that he would have to serve a sentence of 10 years in jail. Does the crime match the sentence? Let me know. Stay safe. Safe.